Laird here with Dr. Stillman and Meredith Oak. If you've been following Dr. Stillman and I for a while, it's no shocker to you, no surprise that learning about quantum biology, quantum health, learning about circadian rhythms, light, water, magnetism has been an absolute game changer, not only for my health, but also in our practices and our coaching practices and helping clients. And so Meredith is here today to talk about a certification that she has, where she helps educate practitioners. So Meredith, why did you decide to put this together?
So it was one of those things that I had no intention of entering this arena, so to speak. I'm an executive coach. It's fun. It pays well. I was having a good time. But I was noticing that I had my own health journey, and we had to come to this information, and it was incredibly difficult to understand what to do and to understand people who understood what to do. And I worked with a mentor in this space who had a lot of information, but the practical application of it didn't really, it wasn't there. It was like it was all academic and theoretical, but when it came down to like looking at my labs and figuring out what to do, there was no follow through. So then I found Dr. Stillman, who was one of the first clinicians that I encountered who had both the scientific understanding of quantum biology and understood how to work with it day to day with patients. So I have created a faculty of people who have both of those things, the scientific understanding and the clinical experience to know what it's like to work with other human beings, applying this in their practices.
In the real world.
They've told me it's been game changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's huge, because there's a lot of people who are really, really book smart who cannot apply it to everyday life and coaching everyday people. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the course and what's in it and how it helps practitioners?
Sure. So it's a mix of the science, right? And, Dr. Stillman just recorded a really great module 1 that we're adding in. He's our latest faculty member, and we're really excited about that. And it's so you start out with an overview of like why medicine missed the boat on this and what exactly it is we're talking about, what light, water, and magnetism have to do with human health. And then there are some parts where we break it down in detail and some parts that are more general, but everything is targeted to a practical outcome. So there are review quizzes to make sure that people have, that you've kind of learned the information, but the main thrust of the coursework is like, okay, so what are you going to do with this now? And we provide coaching support and community support, because it's really, and Dr. Stillman can probably speak to this, like stepping out of a paradigm into a new paradigm, when you've got clients and patients on the line, it can be challenging and scary. And I understand why people are hesitant to do it.
Well,
so we put in all the support factors in place to help that be a smoother transition.
You see this in the fitness industry as well. Somebody goes to a seminar, they learn something new, and they throw out everything they've been doing for the last 10 years and start doing this new thing. So you want to bring things in gradually and not just throw everything out. And a lot of it might have worked, right? So a lot of people learn something new, and it's like, we're going to scrap everything and we're just going to go up like full head charge into this.
And they're like, oh, I'm gonna like throw at everything I'm doing and just talk about light. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Adding in a piece. It's not.
And they call you back and go, I just lost every one of my clients. I don't know why.
No. We have coaching calls to catch them before they actually do that.
And I think that's a big thing that sets this certification up, is the coaching calls and the support. Because a lot of these coaching programs, it'll just be a course that a lot of people won't even go through, and you've got all this follow up, and that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember when I fell down the quantum rabbit hole, so to speak, back in 2017, a patient of mine at a very high level wellness spa, let's call it, turned me on to one of the leaders in the field. And I started reading and watching and listening and learning. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I have to throw out everything I know. And I didn't have clients at the time. I was a traveling doctor. But the challenge was trying to integrate the new information with my traditional training and then my alternative integrative medical training as well. Because you have in the integrative medical space, you have a lot of sort of, I would call them the old guard. I'm not going to name any names, but they're the big names in what's known as integrative, holistic, functional, and natural medicine, right? And the crazy thing about this is that those people, the standard bearers and the people setting the standard for care, know apparently nothing about EMF and nothing about quantum health. And it's actually very disappointing, because it's not the quantum mechanics behind it is complex, but the concepts are not. And actually integrating it into your practice is not. And as Jim and I have found, we'll get much better results than our competition by bringing together this new quantum paradigm with the old functional natural integrative medicine paradigm. I get my inspiration for that from books that were written, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, a couple decades ago. But those guys who are focused on food, nutrition, supplements, they're generally not up on light and water and magnetism and EMF. And so they completely miss the boat. And the big challenge is that you're going to find, if you're listening to this and you're a clinician or a patient, that a certain number of your cases, the really big problem, as Jim likes to say, the really big rock, is a quantum problem. It's bad light, it's bad EMF exposure, it's bad water, it's bad something energetic or bioenergetic. And until you embrace this paradigm, you're going to have these cases where you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall, wondering, why won't this person lose weight, put on muscle, get rid of their headaches, improve their sleep? I mean, I see my colleagues doing just out of control, heroic things, using absolutely wild doses of nutrients and supplements in order to get traction on a case, where I just say, well, are you going outside? Well, no. Do you sleep on the wrong side of a wall from a smart meter? Well, actually, yeah, I do. Is that a problem? Oh, you mean you've had multiple cases where that was the key thing that they had to change in order to get better? Absolutely. And so, as you mentioned, Meredith, the big thing that people struggle with, and that I struggled with as I was starting out, was, to what degree can I fix everybody with light, water, and magnetism? And to what degree do I need to incorporate things like supplements and, old school natural medicine, everything from coffee enemas to sauna to herbs to homeopathics? And what do I do? And that's what I've really made my life about, is integrating all these different things and all these different paradigms, so that patients are, and also clinicians, are not left wondering, what am I supposed to do? Where do I start? Do I start with light? Do I start with EMF? Do I start with this? Do I start with that? And that's why the coaching and certification program that you have is really great. You're going to help people integrate this knowledge into their life, and if you're a practitioner, your practice, so that you can actually get better results, not miss cases. Because, as one of my mentors said, and this is so important for people who are building a practice too, or who want to escape the 9 to 5, or, in many cases for clinicians, the like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. grind of clinical medicine. Because what you'll find is, you'll kind of learn enough to be dangerous. But as one of my mentors likes to say, he says, if you get the diagnosis and you get the patient better, you're a hero. And if you don't, you're a zero. And so every clinician understands after a while, in launching and having their own practice, even if you're working for somebody else, that if you have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of trust from the patient for them to commit to what you're going to tell them to do. And if you don't pick the big things that are going to get them big traction, they're not going to come back and see you, and your practice is going to, die on the vine, or at best struggle. And that's what we're here to really help people do. Understand, where do you start? How do you figure out what to integrate first? What are the key things to do? Not just telling people, well, you got to sell all your worldly possessions and move to, the equator or the 11th latitude or whatever, because it just doesn't work for people. And they need a more compassionate, understanding, gradual approach in most cases to get significant, durable results.
Yeah, you can't take somebody who's been living an indoor life in air conditioning, who doesn't work out and take them to, living an outdoor life on the equator in like one day. That just doesn't happen. It's not going to work well.
No.
Yeah.
So.
And that meeting people where they're at is so important. And the laying the foundation of a healthy, I mean, we've been calling it a quantum health, but it's really just health.
Yeah.
Laying those foundations of having enough healthy light and mitigating enough of the bad stuff. Yeah. So then when you do add the other interventions, you've got some kind of baseline of understanding. I think of it like if someone's totally in complete circadian dysregulation, how can you even get an accurate diagnosis? It's like trying to diagnose a drunk person with a psychiatric disorder. Like, how can you even tell they're just not in their right state?
Well, they also just end up chasing symptoms and chasing diagnoses. The big thing that opened my eyes to this was working at a clinic that worked with a lot of people who'd received the diagnosis of chronic Lyme or mold toxicity. And I watched these people bounce from clinic to clinic and practice to practice. I've had patients, more than one, go to clinics in Germany and get therapeutic hyperthermia, or Swiss mountain clinics in Switzerland. They've gone to, Mexico for this and that and the other thing. I mean, patients have just gone all over the place, done everything, seen everyone. Their medical history is sort of like a who's who of doctors. And what I found, and what really convinced me that quantum medicine was something we needed to approach, and like you said, Meredith, this is not, it's not, in many ways, the understanding of the material is new, but the material itself and the lessons are not. The Greek god of healing was Apollo, who was the god of the sun. And the Hippocratic Oath starts with, I swear to Apollo the healer. And that's the beginning of the Hippocratic Oath. And they recognized that sunlight was very important for health. Centuries later in the Byzantine Empire, the plague of Justinian coincided with a period of global cooling and a reduction in the amount of light coming to the earth. Newsflash, for those of you not aware of this, anyone who wants to reduce the amount of sunlight coming to earth either doesn't understand that sunlight is good for you or wants you to get sick and die young. Side note. But the point is that the ancient Greeks understood this. All ancient cultures and ancient peoples understood this. But modern science, modern medicine really got off track with the pharmaceutical drugs and surgeries for everything paradigm, because they didn't understand the quantum principles behind light, behind electromagnetism. In many cases, just because industries have been built on bad habits, bad paradigms, and those industries don't want people to hear the truth because it will wreck their bottom line. Guys like Jim and I, we get people off their technology, off their social media. We get them out into nature. They're spending less money. Their food's more affordable because in some cases they can make their food more affordable, but in many cases they're actually spending more on it. But that's a totally other issue. But the point is just we get people back to these basics and fundamentals, and it pulls them out of the modern technological world and the consumerist economy. And it's really important for people to understand that that's actually really one of the most important things to do for your health in our modern world.
Yes. And it's possible to do that while maintaining an active life within our civilization, right?
It is. You're coming to us from a beautiful rural location, right?
Forget it. I'm moving to wherever and starting a regenerative farm. And, that's amazing. I fully support that. But some of us still just live what would look like a normie-con lifestyle, but we are able to implement these things. It's a mindset.
Well, people still don't realize that a little bit of light goes a long way.
It's little things. It's little things. Jim is sitting in a location we work out of the same house, and Jim's sitting in a location that's 20 feet from the other location that he works at. And the amount of light he's getting in that location is tenfold what he's getting at the other. And people don't notice that because their pupil dilates and contracts. And so Jim's getting 10 times the amount of light that somebody else is getting if they're working at a workstation that's just 10, 15, 20 feet away. Little things like changing the orientation of your desk, adding a little light here or there. Like I've got my SonaSpace Photon on my desk. I'll use it at night. I'll use it during the day, even though it runs up my cooling bill in the summer. So
the guy sits in his sauna in Florida when it's 105 heat index out
I
here.
do.
I'm sitting out here dripping with sweat, just sitting
You
here.
are.
And
You
he's
are.
in his sauna space, baking away. And I'm just like, I don't understand it.
Yes, you do. And this is so funny, right? This is a great example of the things that we help practitioners navigate, right?
Yeah.
That don't get talked about in the health and wellness info space, that don't get talked about in the books we read. I mean, I often open books from influencers, many of whom are my friends. And I don't mean to disparage them in any way. I want to be really clear about that. But many of these books, you open them and it's clear to a practitioner that these people don't coach or treat very large swaths of the public. They may be the expert at coaching someone into, a gold medal in swimming at the Olympics, but that doesn't make them a great coach, or it doesn't make their diet the best diet if you want to be a power lifter or just be a grandma who can get down on the floor and play with her kids. These are very different goals, very different people. But Jim is 245 pounds, incredible amounts of muscle. He's got so much muscle, he was able to drop 10 pounds like over a week, Jim?
Yeah, that was mostly water though.
By fasting? Yeah. And so, Jim at 250 pounds and 5'10", he sweats bullets just out in 95 or 98 degree heat. I'm 185 pounds, but I'm 6 foot and I'm long and lanky, so I radiate heat very quickly. And that means that if I walk out into the heat in Florida, it actually takes me a while to break a sweat. So Jim doesn't need a sauna, but I love a sauna. And so little things like that can actually make a world of difference, because a lot of people are going to think, oh, we don't need a sauna. You live in Florida. Just go outside. It's not true. That person may benefit enormously from a sauna. They may learn to love
the sauna will wreck me, absolutely destroy me. Sauna just does not agree with me. So I'm a great asset in the wintertime.
So
Yeah.
Jim, I'm actually really curious. I don't know if we've ever gotten into this, but what happens when you jump in the sauna?
I can't get enough fluid. It literally is like it's literally like you put a towel in the pool, and I dumped so much fluid. It's just hard for me to get enough electrolytes and enough fluid back into me. Like, you think I sweat sitting out here? If I went in that sauna space, the water would be running out. So I will sauna in the wintertime, but I have to keep the temperatures down or it makes me feel terrible.
And again, we see this happening. People will come to us who've worked with other people and they say they wanted me to do this and it just didn't work for me, and they wouldn't budge. They wouldn't find a different solution. They wouldn't meet me in the middle. And I just didn't feel like I could talk to them or come to them. And that's one of the things that I love helping other practitioners understand, is where their people are and how to shift them at the right speed in the right direction so they can get results without, basically being saddled with solutions that aren't working for them
or make them miserable.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the end, you got to enjoy life some. If your life is completely miserable, then that's no fun either.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I also love about this approach to health, is that, I think it's a bit ironic that I am sort of ended up in this space, because I don't really enjoy focusing on like health stuff. I don't like micromanaging my food. I don't like thinking about it. I just want to go have my day. But what I found about this approach with the light water magnetism, the quantum health, is that it's fun, right? Like, I now do things like go for a walk with my husband, and take the dog out, go outside with my children. And I'm like, this is good for me. And it's life enhancing. And you can make anything drudgery if you have a mind that wants to do that. But it is very easy to make this enjoyable and lighthearted. And, it's like, oh, I'll read my book on the porch instead of in the library, right? And that makes a difference. Just all these fun little things that I think sometimes, I come from the client perspective. We get a little beaten down, like trying to remember all the things we're supposed to be doing. And, I see in the comments sometimes people are like, great, another thing that's bad for me.
I know.
There's so much that's good for you too. And that's really what
and the human being is incredibly resilient as well. That's one thing we really try and encourage people and tell people.
And adaptable.
Yeah, very adaptable. Like, there are things you need to watch out for, but obviously the reason we get outside and we take care of ourselves is so we can handle these stresses. If you have to stay somewhere where you have no control over the Wi-Fi, you have the resiliency to handle that, right? And then also the big thing I think is, I lost my train of thought there for a second. What was I going to say?
Resiliency, adaptability.
I was going to say, honestly, what we're doing is we're just taking people back from our modern indoor life where most people like spend 90% of their time indoors and trying to get them to, still use some of this modern technology, but to get them back to like a 1950s, 1960s, where you're spending more time outside, you're being more active outside, you're doing some manual labor. That really, it's our modern life from like the 80s, 90s on that's really pulled us inside with the screens. We're just taking us back like, 50 years. You go back 50 years and the majority of people are not sitting in their house 90% of their time. And, you didn't have the chronic obesity epidemic back then that you do now. And people weren't even, people didn't even go to the gym back then. It was, women, it was unpopular. Like women, it was unfeminine for them to work out. So we got more people working out now than ever before and more obese people. So, what's changed? The environment has changed.
Yes. And that's what, I think is so helpful for practitioners to learn, and why this certification is so helpful, right? It's like you can do a sort of a lifestyle assessment and see what's going on with a person and troubleshoot like much more easily. And to your point, Jim, about the environment changing, right? Like what I hear a lot when I interview practitioners is that stuff that used to work, like even just 5 years ago, they used to do, well, we'll do this diet and this supplement and this thing, and like everyone got better. And now people are not responding in the same way because the environment's changed. So to understand how your clients' bodies are interacting with their environment has to be part of your practice, because our environment is just changing so fast.
Well, when your circadian rhythm is broken, everything becomes more difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Dave asked a question, which is a great example of a question that people will get and that they need to have a good answer to as a clinician, and that obviously people need to be aware of as a patient or a client or whatever you want to call it, which is how much sweat should we shoot for each day? I enjoy working shirtless outside throughout the day, but wonder, is it possible to get too much sun/heat? What is optimal? And so, this question basically boils down to, is there an amount of sun that based on the literature we can say is overall bad for you? This brings me back to one of the big principles that guides, I would say, quantum medicine, which is there's no study that's ever shown that getting more sun increases your risk of death and disability. All of them showed the opposite. It reduces your risk of death, reduces your risk of disability, improves things like metabolism, immunity, longevity, etc. So on the flip side of that, right, it's easy for us to say, oh, well, then you should just get as much sun as possible. But we've all seen that backfire, right? And the people out there who are, the gingers, the very fair-skinned, my patients who I joke, when they walk outside on a hot sunny day, burst into flames, they just roll their eyes at this because they say it is not physically possible for me to get that much sun. I will roast like a turkey in the oven. And so you have to understand that and be sensitive to that if you're going to guide these people into habits and lifestyles that are going to help them. So they need enough sun to not burn, because burning's bad. A lot of what you change in their diet and lifestyle will improve their ability to tolerate the sun. Eating foods that have lots and lots of nutrients that are consumed by sunlight, like folate and beta carotene, which means getting plenty of green leafy vegetables and plenty of fresh fruits, which of course are only in season when UV light is strong. So that's number one. And then number two is sweat. The big liability is losses of minerals. So I just looked at some labs, husband and wife, they eat the same thing. They live in the same house, sleep in the same bed, have very similar lifestyles, right? But the husband is outside in the sun all day, sweating a lot, doing hard manual labor. His magnesium level is, like 15 or 20% lower than hers. So what is that likely due to? The loss of magnesium due to excessive sweating, due to manual labor. So being able to understand that and decode that, you understand, okay, this gentleman may need more of a magnesium load from his diet or from supplements, or in extreme cases, using things like IV magnesium in order to maintain his magnesium levels. And you can look at other things like where is their sodium level, what is their urine specific gravity, what illnesses do they have, from high blood pressure to diabetes to gout. Lots of little clues in labs and things like that that I can't, unpack in a couple minutes on a live, can help you understand what to do for them as a clinician to get them the best results. And the bottom line here is making sure that you're not getting demineralized by your sweat losses.
Well, and I think the thing too is, one, does the person have a solar callus, right? Because I spend so much time outside in the morning. Right. I can handle, I go to Nicaragua, I go to Mexico, and I can be in the sun all day. But I also sense when it's getting to be a little too much, and then I just go in the shade. And if you look at Latin cultures, they usually have a break in the most intense time in the afternoon to go chill in the shade and hang out, right? So a lot of it is intuitive. Like, you feel it. You're like, oh, that's a little too much for me right now. I'm gonna go sit in the shade. But and educating people on how to build a solar callus, and if they can, if people don't have the ability to spend the time to build a solar callus, then we're going to be a little more conservative on their sun exposure recommendation, right?
Well, speaking of which, Jim, one of the funny things is that, as Meredith mentioned, cases are getting harder. This is not as easy as it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And with that, we have to adapt our toolbox and add new tools. One of the things that Jim and I have been looking at more and more recently is peptides. And it's funny that Jim mentioned solar callus in the same sentence as peptides, because you can use certain peptides in order to make even the palest person turn absolutely dark brown. And these may be things that we are reaching for more in coming years as we get more and more difficult cases, as the environment gets worse and worse from a quantum perspective. And being able to integrate all that information is best done in a team setting where physicians and other healthcare practitioners are collaborating and talking about what works, what doesn't work, creating networks of people who refer to one another, who may have tools or specializations that can really help the patient get the best outcome possible.
Yes. And I did want to add to that. So, we have a now accredited school for training practitioners in the light water magnetism. But for people listening who are not practitioners, I really highly encourage you to hire one. I'm not a health coach, so this is not, I can say this with total impunity. Like, you cannot get well following people on social media. Social media is amazing for finding the people that you connect with, that you resonate with, but you know who the people are. If you're on here, it's probably Leland and Jim, right? Like, they're the people you follow, and you always want to know what they have to say. You just feel like they understand. I urge you to follow up and take their programs, do their courses, get a one-on-one, do a consult. Just if you've been feeling unwell and you're surfing around, take that next step. It's really, really the only way. I speak from experience.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you can schedule a consultation with me and my team by clicking on the schedule a consult link in my link tree. Jim and I have a group coaching program and course that we recommend people start with called Fundamentals of Wellness. We have monthly group coaching calls on that. And as part of that program, which is where we help people really figure this out and fine tune it for their unique context.
Meredith, tell us how as far as the certification, how long do you enroll people all the time, or do you only enroll people at certain times?
We're currently doing a cohort based. It's cohort based. So we have one kicking off a week today, which is Monday, July 17th.
Okay.
And registration is open this week. This is our big registration week. It goes for 8 weeks. It's hybrid, so the lectures are all recorded, and then you have live Q&As with our instructors. So you have live Q&A with Dr. Stillman. You have a live Q&A with Carrie Bennett, who's really excellent. She's like a biology teacher, but quantum. She really breaks things down.
She's great. I've watched a lot of her Instagram lives.
Links to join are below, by the way.
Yes, they're in the description.
Yes.
Who else is part of the course?
So the faculty are Dr. Stillman, Carrie Bennett, and Heathar Shepard, who's a homeopath. So we have like a full spectrum, because people often say too, like, oh, well, what's the quantum biologic approach to bioidentical hormones? And it's like, well, it depends who you talk to, right? Like, some people are, if you talk to a homeopath, who comes from that field, she might have one opinion, and someone, Dr. Stillman would have another, and Carrie might have another. So within within this framework, it's possible to have, a different approach and to stay true to your roots, whatever those roots are. But we get doctors, we get naturopaths. We usually have about 20% doctors, naturopaths, and then 80% psychologists, body workers, energy workers, health coaches, nutritionists, trainers, all different. Anyone who sees clients and patients with the goal of helping them achieve better wellness, this works well for. And then I actually wanted, Dr. Stillman, I wanted to get your take on this. I had an email yesterday from Bob, and Bob wanted to know if he should take the course. And Bob is a forensic pathologist. What do you have? So I hadn't had that inquiry before. What are your thoughts?
That's a great question. It's really hard for me to answer without having an actual dialogue with somebody like Bob. What I would say is that if your ambition is to help people get better, taking the course will be eye-opening and worth your time and money. Many people who are interested in this do not see how to directly monetize it. And that's okay. Because a lot of the time, learning how to turn it into something that can give you the freedom to do more of it. And if there's one thing that practitioners reach out to me regarding, it's that they say, look, I fit into a traditional paradigm, but I'm very dissatisfied and I want to practice a new paradigm. But trying to practice the new paradigm is a little bit like, if the old paradigm is like skiing down a snow-covered mountain, the new paradigm is like running through, a forest. You cannot run through a forest on skis. It doesn't work. So you have to have a new model. And that's why my practice really doesn't operate like any other practice I've ever been in. And I built the programs that we offer for annual plans, which people can learn more about by, again, clicking the schedule a consultation button. I built them to give people the best of the best in functional and integrative and natural, and also, allopathic conventional medicine, so that they didn't have to keep running around everywhere and having like 12 different practitioners and not knowing who exactly to mastermind the whole thing. So I think that for people who at some point want to do something in this world that is a part of their daily life and daily practice, whether that's all you're doing is sharing information on Twitter or making Instagram videos, or you're actually coaching people, or you're doctoring people, virtually or in person, then taking the course is wise, because you're going to get exposure to practitioners who are actually doing it and doing it in a really wide variety of ways. And you're great about this. You had a webinar, I think a couple months ago, where you had somebody come on and talk about what it was like to start a direct primary care practice. And I'm sure you helped people understand how you would integrate the quantum perspective into that model.
Yes. Yeah, that was fantastic, because it's like you can't really practice this paradigm within the old system. You have to create your own structure and your own way of doing it. So yeah.
Well, Meredith, thank you so much for coming on today. I highly encourage you to check out the link in the description and register for her course. Check it out if you're a practitioner, if you're a coach that works with people. It's great information. Dr. Stillman does a great job teaching on there. And
thank you.
The fact that they're doing continuous Q&As to help give you information from different practitioners is very helpful, so you can help integrate this stuff seamlessly into your practice without losing all of your clients. So,
and while getting better results for your current clients.
Correct. Better results with less effort.
Yeah. I want to quickly answer this question because it's very short. Anne Boudreau asks, which peptides affect tanning ability? Those would be melanotan 1 and melanotan 2. That's a story for another day.
It's a long story.
Is it, Jim?
It is. It can be.
We should do a podcast episode on that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It'd be fun.
Anyway.
Have a great day, everyone. Get yourself outside.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you.
Good to see you guys.